4:30 in time for the Mud 7 Board of Directors meeting. And at the time, we didn't have a quorum, but now I see that we have at least myself and Paul and Don Sarich. Is that Stephanie that dialed in? Somebody, maybe Henry?
It's Stephanie.
Okay. I don't know who the 8507 number is.
That's me. That's Don.
Okay. All right. Well, we do have a quorum now, so I'm going to suggest that we call the meeting to order and move forward. We've got our attorney here. Brian, would you read us the rules that we're going to be operating by with today's meeting and help us get the ball rolling?
This is Brian. Happy to, Kyle. This is Brian Yates with Schwartz, Page and Harding, and welcome everybody to the Montgomery County MUD number 7 Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, April the 20th, 2021. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through the meeting procedures for our remote meeting and perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we will continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely today so that we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. But starting with our board of directors,
I'm exporting them out to Neptune 360 right now. There's a ton.
This is Brian Maureen. I think you need to mute your.
Yeah, a bunch of I guess a bunch of stuck. So there's some 46.
This Maureen, if you're able to mute your line.
You got it.
Okay. All right. Starting with the board of directors, Kyle Mays.
Here.
Paul Nelson.
Nothing here.
Henry Cheek. Henry, I think you may be muted.
I don't see him on the cast of characters, so it looks like he is not here.
Okay. Then we'll mark him initially as absent. Don Sarich.
Yes, here.
Stephanie Zertucci.
Present.
Okay, that completes the roll call for our board. We do have a quorum present. Moving on to Woodlands Water staff, Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Here.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
I'm here.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
Present.
Anyone else from Woodlands Water in the meeting? Moving on to the River Authority, Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Ed Shackelford. Is Ed in this meeting?
Present.
Okay, Matt Corley.
Present.
Anyone else from the River Authority in the meeting? All right, if not, we'll move on to consultants for MUD 7. Do we have any MUD 7 consultants in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well. Okay, that'll complete the roll call. Kyle, I'll hand it back over to you to begin the agenda. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Brian. Since there are no members of the public, we will skip item 2. That takes us to item 3, which is consider and act on requests for adjustments to or relief from the specific charges imposed by the district.
Hi, this is
Any
Jeannie, and I don't have any.
All right,
And this is
thank you.
Mike. I have none this month either.
Excellent. That brings us to our consent agenda, which is actually items 4 through 7. So we're talking minutes, financial reports, investment reports, tax collector's report. The only thing that's a little unusual is the resolution adopting an additional penalty on delinquent real property taxes. Everything else is pretty standard. I have a question on what's the change to the penalty on delinquent taxes? Can somebody just give us quick color on that one? Item
This is
8.
Brian. So that's the standard resolution we have each year to pass on the penalty to pass on the fee that the district pays to the delinquent tax attorney, which is 20%, to pass that on to the delinquent taxpayer beginning on the first date that's eligible under the Texas property tax code. So we have this resolution every year and have started to put it under the consent agenda since it's a standard administrative item.
Okay. Any questions from the board on the consent agenda items? If not, can I get a proposal that we approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
This is Stephanie. I
Motion from
second.
Don Sarich. Stephanie second. All right, this is Kyle Mays. I vote aye. Paul Nelson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Don Sarich, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Stephanie Zartuche, how do you vote?
Aye.
Those 6 items, 7 items are passed. Takes us to item 11. Receive and act upon staff information regarding the upcoming MCAD Board of Directors election.
Every 2 years, the Central Appraisal District holds elections for its board members. There is a special purpose district candidate considered each year, or every election year. Last year, Arthur Bredehoff ran for that position, but as I recall, was defeated by Peggy Hausman. The township has the majority of the votes to kind of control that position. But last year it was Arthur's belief that the MUD should put somebody forth, and he chose to run. He feels the same way this year. Last month, you may recall, we talked about this, and I really didn't have anybody contact me from our existing MUDs that expressed an interest in being a candidate. So Arthur called a couple of days ago and wanted to be considered. So Monday night, the Metro Center MUD selected Arthur, or chose to submit a document requesting a contested election for the special purpose district candidate, and Arthur will be that person. So unless you have another candidate that you want to put in that mix, you do not need to take any action today, if all that made sense.
Okay, so does anybody want to nominate somebody as a potential director or candidate to be a director on the appraisal district board, or does anybody want to sign up and volunteer? Or I don't know if it's a volunteer position or a paid position, but is anybody else interested in serving in that way? All righty, don't see anybody raising their hand, so if that's the case, we do not need to act on that. Anybody? Okay, let's move to item 12. Mr. Yates, attorney's report, please, sir.
This is Brian. Thank you, Kyle. So under the attorney's report, mainly been providing an update on the legislative session. went into some level of detail on that at the trustees meeting last week. We are really in the thick of the session at this point. We've actually had roughly the same number of bills filed this session as in previous sessions, which was a little bit of a surprise considering that the session has been compressed due to COVID and some of the early security concerns following the incident in DC. But they have still managed to file almost 7,000 bills, which that's about typical in a regular session. They may file 300 or 400 bills more in a regular session, but they just got filed in a shorter period of time. We're tracking overall for our district clients and assisting AWBD are tracking a little under 900 bills. To kind of give you a sense of scale, only about 15% or less of bills ultimately pass, so around 1,000. So right now we're in the thick of the weeding out process where bills are being assigned to committees, bills that have some momentum are getting hearings, ones that aren't, and are making ones that do have momentum are making their way through the legislative process for approval in both the House and the Senate. So a number of bills we're passing. It's still a little early to be able to say with a lot of confidence which bills will ultimately become law and what the text of those will be, as opposed to which ones we're pretty confident will fall by the wayside. Should have a lot better sense of that by this time next month, since the session does end at the end of May. Shelley did circulate out an email to the directors that had a couple of links to an AWBD summary or a couple of AWBD summary of bills that they're tracking that we're assisting AWBD with. I think that is a useful kind of primer if you're wanting to dive into that in some more detail. Overall, I'd say some popular categories this session are elections, as you'd probably expect after the November cycle. There are a number of bills dealing with election mechanics and ID requirements and just processes of elections that could impact us, and we're monitoring those bills. A lot of bills introduced this session that relate to property taxes. You'll recall last session, Senate Bill 2 passed that restricted the ability of governmental entities, including MUDs, to generate tax revenue in excess of a percentage from year to year for maintenance tax. The point being to help to restrict increasing tax burdens by taxpayers, property taxpayers throughout the state. This session, the focus is more on appraised values and appraisals as opposed to tax revenue received by taxing jurisdictions. There are a number of bills filed related to some caps on appraisals. There are bills floating around that would reduce the 10% per year cap down to 5%, or some are down to 2.5% or 3.5%. There have been some introduced that would freeze the value of a home, resident home, at the time that you move in, and it would stay frozen for the duration of the time that you're there. And then there have been some bills that would make either the board of directors of an appraisal district or the appraisal review board subject to an election by voters that are within the jurisdiction of the appraisal district. So we're watching those bills closely for our districts. And also there are a number of transparency bills, as there seem to be every session over the last, 3 or 4 sessions. It seems like transparency has been a real focus of the legislature. This time, you probably received the AWBD e-blast from around a month or so ago regarding Senate Bill 526 that was introduced by Senator Colkhurst. Had some concerning provisions for the overall MUD community. We were able to work with Senator Colkhurst over the last few weeks to have a substantial rewrite of that bill, and that has been introduced as a substitute. We feel a lot better about that bill at this point. There have also been some bills introduced that would allow for some semblance of remote access, either by some bills would allow for just residents to be able to participate remotely. Some would allow for elected officials to participate remotely in some instances. Those are not getting a whole lot of traction at this point, but that could change. But we're watching that as well. But I think a good place to start if you want more information on bills is on the AWBD summary. And then if you want even more than that, you can look at the bill tracker, our internal bill tracker. I provided that to Shelley as well. That's got the close to 900 bills that we're tracking individually. And there are hyperlinks on that PDF where you can click on it and it'll take you to the Texas legislature online, and you'll be able to see the status of that bill. You know, has it been referred to a committee? Has it received a hearing? Has it received a floor vote, et cetera? So that will give you more detailed information if you're curious. I think that's it on bills. There was a little bit of discussion at the trustee meeting about some bills related to the River Authority. What I've told boards is that if you have particular interest in those bills, that right now they don't appear to be receiving a whole lot of traction. Again, it's a little early to say definitively whether or not the bills are done or if they could still get some life and move forward. But if anyone is interested, should one of those bills receive a hearing in the House, we can work with Ron and Ed and the other folks at the River Authority to get notice of a hearing so that directors can attend that hearing in Austin and testify if they'd like. I'll tell you from experience that those committee hearings come up pretty quick. They don't give you a whole lot of notice. Sometimes you may have 24 hours, 48 hours notice of a hearing. But if your schedule allows for you to be on standby to go and testify, if you're not in favor of one of those bills, one of them has a requirement that the River Authority would have to get voter approval to issue revenue bonds, which is a very unique proposal and would impact the Woodlands because of the River Authority's need to issue revenue bonds for maintaining our water and wastewater infrastructure, as well as the discussion we've had about possibly consolidating the wastewater treatment facilities. That project would be funded with revenue bonds. So that is certainly, if that bill got traction, that would certainly be one of concern for the Woodlands. And the other two bills related to how the directors of the River Authority are selected. One of them just allowed for commissioners' courts to provide non-binding recommendations to the governor. That one wasn't really problematic. The other one would actually take the appointment away from the governor and make the directors be elected instead. And so that would be a significant change. So if you have a strong opinion on that bill as well, we can keep you in the loop about that bill. But that's kind of the 10-cent tour of where we are in the session, but happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
President May, I'd like to ask Brian a question.
Sure.
If I could.
Sure.
Brian, I have been tracking bills, but more about water issues, et cetera. But have you heard of a bill or watched a bill that has been introduced that would limit groundwater districts' ability to recover legal fees, et cetera, after a successful lawsuit? Making it more of a discretionary thing with the judge rather than right now it's kind of.
Yeah, I think I do remember seeing a bill about that. It struck shall and put may in there. I can't remember what the bill number was, but I do remember seeing that bill.
Yeah, I have it written down. I just didn't, I don't want to talk about it. I just wondered if you knew about it and where it was.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, that is on our tracker list.
thank you.
I'm gonna make a suggestion, just in the interest of brevity, that you probably described 20 or 30 different bills, Brian, and maybe just having an insert in the packet with a list of all those bills, and you could just have us refer to the page and answer questions on the ones that people have questions about. It might save you some time as well. Just a thought.
Yeah, this is Brian. So it's with the session as dynamic as it is. I mean, I think what about the best we can provide right now are these tracker lists and the AWBD summaries. I think it's a little difficult with how fluid the session is to have much more than that during the session. Now, after the session's over, we'll have our full write-up that will summarize bills, and that's a very thorough document for the board that we'll have after the session's over.
Brian, you mentioned the state's legislative tracking. That's one of the better, I think, applications on the internet. I think they've done a wonderful job to notify you when they're going to have a hearing, when it, passes, when it got both versions of it, et cetera. So, I mean, it's really easy to use, and you can actually set up alerts.
Correct.
I like it.
All right, any other questions, comments for our attorney? Brian, anything else?
This is Brian. No, just the only other thing is, as I've been reporting each month, the governor has not given any indication on that proclamation that suspended the in-person meeting requirement. So it's status quo in terms of our remote meetings for now.
Okay, well, that brings us to item 13, which is consider and act upon approval of revised policy number Con 10, which is 4 pages, starting on page 24. Would somebody like to summarize what that change, the revision is about?
This is Brian. So we discussed last month the proposed change to the policy. I think we had a red line last month for directors that identified what the changes in the terminology was. There have not been any modifications from what was presented last month. Last month it was just on the agenda as a discussion item. This month it's on agendas as an action item. So no changes from what was presented last month and discussed last month.
Okay, any board member questions or comments on the revised policy Con 10? All right, this is Kyle Mays. I make a proposal that we approve this new revised policy.
Second, Nelson.
Second from
Second.
Paul Nelson. This is Kyle Mays. I vote aye. Paul, how do you vote?
Aye.
Don, how do you vote?
Aye.
Stephanie, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Which moves us to item 14.
Kyle, there
consider
was
not-
one bill I forgot to mention that was actually probably the most important one. There's a House bill that has been introduced that would designate the day after the Super Bowl as a state holiday.
Nice. I think they should make it, April 21st when they do Aggie muster or something like that, but
Yeah, something something a little more legitimate than the day after the Super Bowl. Well, I just forgot to touch on that one, so I wanted to make sure I brought that up before we moved on. Thanks.
thank goodness we got that in the minutes. All right. Item 14, consider and act on approval of interlocal agreement regarding Spring Creek Watershed Flood Control Dam conceptual engineering feasibility study. Sounds like a Jim Stinson.
Yes, sir. This is the culmination of many, many months of effort to move forward with the siting, follow-up of what we called our siting study for potential detention reservoirs and dam sites upstream of Spring Creek or upstream of the woodlands along Spring Creek. You may recall we partnered with the San Jacinto River Authority. They put together a grant application, received funding assistance from the Texas Water Development Board. And we also have additional partners. We now have the city of Humble is participating in this, and we have the Harris County Flood Control District participating, MUD 386, and then MUDs 1, 7, 60, and 46 here in the Woodlands. So this is an important step forward in looking to see if we can implement some detention to help drainage in the woodlands along Spring Creek. Requesting and recommending that you authorize approval of this interlocal agreement.
Okay, well, it's supposed to be an insert. Is there a page number in the document on Google Drive where we can reference that agreement?
Shelley, can you help us?
Yeah, it should have been an insert. Hang on a second, let me look at the Google Drive.
Was that a separate document on the Google Drive?
Yeah, it would have been a separate document.
I think back in your March meetings, we gave you an estimated range of what each MUD's contribution would be. For MUD 7, the anticipated contributions about $22,500. The worst case scenario, depending on what the Texas Water Development Board approves and the SJRA in-kind contribution would be about $29,000. So somewhere between 22 and 29,000 is going to be your share.
Okay, so that's,
I was going to ask.
that's really the important thing is that's our the amount of money that we kind of have on the line or at risk or however you want to refer to it.
And this is a very good deal. You know, it's with the flood control district participation, the city of Humble contributing $50,000 in cash, and with the grant participation, that we're getting a lot of study, well over $1 million in engineering study for a very good contribution, a very reasonable fee.
We're asked to approve the form and your ability to execute the agreement on our behalf.
That's correct.
I can make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we have a motion from Director Nelson. We have a second.
This is
No,
Stephanie, I
second.
second.
And
Okay.
just
All
for
right.
clarification, there may be some minor tweaks after it goes through the Harris County Commissioners Court, but I wouldn't be signing anything that had any substantial change to it. And Brian, I'll consult with Brian Yates. I think it just may be names and phone numbers and maybe emails and things like that could be tweaked, and you'll get a copy of the final executed document.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve this interlocal agreement on the engineering feasibility study. This is Kyle Mays, and I vote aye. Paul Nelson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Don Sarich, how do you vote?
Aye.
Stephanie Zertuche, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. That passes unanimously and brings us to the general manager's report, item 15.
Thank you, sir. A few items to highlight from our trustee meeting. We did finally have a vote that was a unanimous approval of moving forward with the San Jacinto River Authority completing or posting the request for qualifications on and looking at the feasibility of wastewater treatment consolidation. I did report that we had a meeting with the Woodlands Township upper management and Director Reeser and Director Gordy Bunch, and they were supportive of this effort and even requested that we include in the scope looking at the MUD 386 plant and looking at some land that they have that might be another option for a consolidation plant location. So we'll take that information and include it in the scope. I did report that the San Jacinto Regional Flood Planning Group has approved an additional voting member. The classification is upper watershed of the San Jacinto River Authority. A couple of months ago, we had an agenda item on each of our MUDs to consider supporting Neil Gaynor and Stephanie Zertucci should an opening come up on that group. So this position was created. I will be preparing a letter recommending Neil, and I'll need to check on the alternate, but if the alternate position is a part of this, Stephanie will be that alternate recommendation from our MUDs. We're still in discussions with TACUS regarding construction techniques, modifications, notification protocol, reimbursement to the MUDs for damages. We've had a couple of meetings individually with them. The last meeting was with our attorney and their attorney. I would say that the talks are going productive and going well at this point. I've had a request to meet with their chief financial officer tomorrow morning. I'll see what he has to say, but I would say at this point, we're going to continue to talk and see how that goes. We are poised to take legal action if needed, but right now the discussions and negotiations seem to be working. The San Jacinto River Authority Lake Conroe Division oversees the Bear Branch Dam and Reservoir here in the Woodlands. They do an annual inspection of that facility, and their most recent inspection revealed some voids underneath the slope paving of that structure. They are in the process of trying to qualify the extent of those voids. We hope to have information to share with the MUDs over the next couple of months to see what extent this repair and rehab may be. We'll keep you updated on that as more information is available. I continue to work with two locations of AMI poles that were installed and created concern by the neighbors, residents adjacent to the poles. So we're looking at options for that. I did report May 3rd will be a very important meeting with our audit committee and President Eric Hurd and the San Jacinto River Authority staff. I listed in your trustee summary a number of topics that are going to be reviewed at that meeting with reports from the committee back to the trustees at the May meeting. Also, there's an update, a monthly update from HARC in your packet. And I'd also like to recognize Ed Shackelford here tonight. He was at the trustee meeting and we recognized him there, but Ron Kelling, as you know, has announced his retirement in October. Ed has been hired to help fill that void at the River Authority. And Ed has been an active civil engineer in the Montgomery County in the water and wastewater and surface water community for years, very active at AWBD. Those that go to the AWBD conferences over the years certainly, I think, would recognize Ed. So we're very happy to have Ed. Sad to see Ron go, but happy that Ed will be filling in. So Ron, any other comments from your end?
No, you got it. I'm very happy that Ed is on board and look forward to working with him on this transition period.
I'd like to say hey to Ed. I think I was just thinking, Ed, it probably TWCA meetings that you and I have attended. I guess I saw you every 6 months for the last 30 years at those. And now
Yes,
it's been,
it seemed like that, Paul.
at least 20. I know I've been, but anyway, I think, I guess now it's almost 2 years since I've seen you. And so now,
It's been a while since your retirement, yes. But I do look forward to working with each of the mud and mud directors. So, and I know I have huge shoes to fill with Ron leaving, but looking forward to it.
question to Ron's going to be that, what is he going to do with that commute time? You've been commuting quite a ways.
Yeah.
That's all. Thanks. And good to see you, Ed. And
Thanks, Paul.
certainly, Ron, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Fortunately for Ed, Ron has a very easy, low-stress job, so it should be not a problem at all to step right in and take over.
Not a problem.
I've noticed that.
And I might have been kidding just a little bit there. Jim, you had mentioned this potential new location that could be an alternate site for wastewater treatment plant consolidation. Do you know where that is? Did they identify this site?
Yeah, it's somewhere near Gosling Road and Spring Creek. Ron, am I hitting the right location? It's land that's currently owned by the Woodlands Township. I don't know whether it's a suitable site or not, but they did offer it up to be looked into.
Yeah, it's near their or adjacent to their existing wastewater treatment plant for 387. From what we've seen from maps, it's all in the floodplain, so I'm not sure how much it's going to be able to be used, but it's something we need to study further.
Okay. Very good. Any questions regarding the general manager's report? Then we'll move to item 16, consider an act on AWBD district voting member representative.
And it's kind of simple. They're just asking that the MUD select one of their board members to cast the vote at the upcoming amendments to their bylaws and the election trustee election in June. And these votes would be cast electronically. You don't have to be in person at the meeting, but for whatever reason, I think in the past, all of our MUD directors have been able to cast a vote, but now, at least for these two elections, they're requesting that you designate one person to cast the vote.
Would anybody like to volunteer for that responsibility?
I'd like to know if this is just the honor system. I don't assume there's any binding that if some renegade decides to vote contrary to what the MUD feels like, that's just a
Yeah, well,
personal issue.
what we will do is if you select a person, we will send them that person's contact information. So that let's say they select Paul Nelson. Paul Nelson will be put forward for MUD 7. And I guess you would be allowed to vote how you see fit in the election on behalf of MUD 7.
Well, hopefully you won't go rogue on us, Paul.
I can certainly follow instructions and do email, so I'll be glad to volunteer for that.
Then I'll nominate Paul for that position. Anybody else interested in representing the district in the AWBD vote? And I'll make a motion that we approve Paul to represent us for the AWBD voting as listed in item 16.
This is Stephanie. I second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a second. Can Paul vote on this, Brian, or is he kind of abstained since he's being nominated here?
This is Brian. He can vote.
Okay, this is Kyle Mays. I vote aye. Paul, how do you vote?
I vote aye. Thank you.
Don, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Stephanie, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That passes. Congratulations, Paul. You can put that on your resume. And that'll take us to item 17. This past week, I was unable to attend the meeting, and so Stephanie Zertuche represented MUD 7 at the trustee meeting. Stephanie, do you have anything you'd like to report from last week?
Hello, I think most of it's been covered. The only thing really other that happened is that there was a motion to change the time of the meeting. It didn't pass. So it's still going to be at the same time.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for representing the MUD district last week. All right, that takes us to item 18. Any matters for placement on future agenda? Anybody? There being none, the meeting is adjourned.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much, everybody, for being here today.
Bye.
Bye.
Appreciate
Thanks,
all
Carl.
of you. Yep, thank you.